Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Savvy Psychologist. I'm your host, Dr. Ellen Hendrickson, and every week I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. And as promised, this week we'll talk about one way to handle profound grief. So with us is Tom Hart, Eisner-nominated cartoonist and author of the new graphic memoir, Rosalie Lightning, which debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for graphic books upon its release a couple of weeks ago. So Tom, I'm really happy and grateful to have you here. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks so much.
Sure. So Tom, your book is being described as heartbreaking, honest, harrowing, and it's been said about you that, quote, only a cartoonist of tremendous skill and a father with loads of guts could piece through heartbreak and come out with such a piece of art. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience and the book that came out of it?
Sure. Well, to start, I moved with my family from New York City to Gainesville, Florida in the fall of 2011. And within 2 months of that, our daughter, Rosalie, who was just shy of her second birthday, died suddenly and without warning. And that was extremely, as you can imagine, difficult and shocking and harrowing. And so in maybe not so conscious move, I wound up turning to writing and drawing, which is something I've always done constantly since my teenage years, but certainly since my early 20s. And so I found myself writing a lot, trying to both keep my mind busy, but also trying to maybe find a context or find some sort of reason or just try and push myself forward. And after a period of about 5 weeks or so of that, coupled with traveling and trying to get out of, just basically get out of town, I sat down and took the huge binder full of notes from those 5 weeks and structured it and drew it into this graphic memoir that took about 3.5 years to draw.
Yes, and in the book, you take us through those 5 weeks and the search for reasons and warning signs. So in the book, you write, she died with no warning or with tons of warning signs. We still don't know. So how does that not knowing, the uncertainty of why and how she died, how does that affect you?
Well, it's nothing you can prepare for, right? Because it was sudden and
right.
unknown. So that shock is much more harrowing than something that you might see coming. But on the other hand, it's I found that over time, I was grateful that there was nobody to be angry with, and there wasn't. It wasn't violent, and she didn't suffer for a long time. And the fact that it was so quick and so without explanation made it almost seem like it had. I don't know if I mean a cosmic reason, but it seemed like maybe there was some predetermination to it, or it was predestined or something, because it was just so uncommon for things to happen this way. So in the long run, I mean, I'm grateful again that it wasn't, that there's nobody to be mad at, because I don't know if I would have had the strength to do a book if I had such personal other connections to the reasons somehow. It's hard to explain.
No, it makes sense. How did other people help you? Because at least for me, when tragedy strikes, I know I, and I'm sure all our listeners too, wonder what's the best or, the most appropriate way to help. So for you, in your experience, what were the most helpful things someone did or said, or maybe even refrained from doing or saying in the aftermath?
Well, I think my wife and I really needed to be alone a lot. And luckily we had one friend who we just called up and said, can we stay with you indefinitely? And he said yes. And his space was a little bit out of town and had a garden to walk around, and it was near a little wooded area. And so just having that space was immensely helpful, because all we did in the first couple of days and weeks was just sort of stare into space and walk around. I didn't want to be seen or talked to. And I was grateful that lots of people sent cards and other things. Strangely, a couple friends sort of insisted that they come talk to us, and I was actually really grateful for that too. There were two in particular that sort of broke through the sort of defenses I tried to put up and came and visited and talked, and that was really nice. That I'm just talking about the first week or two. In the longer experience, what wound up being very comforting, and it wasn't something I knew I was seeking, was hearing other people's stories of loss. And especially in the book recounts people telling us of stories of other lost children who died. And I didn't realize I'd be looking for those stories or even finding them. I mean, I didn't even know. And at first I just sort of found a couple. And then, but hearing other people and how they got through this kind of suffering, or even just hearing that they did get through that kind of suffering, was so extremely helpful. And eventually I began connecting the dots a little bit and trying to reach out a little bit more for those kinds of stories and reach out for help and just solidarity.
Yeah, so it sounds like it made you feel like you weren't alone or like stranded on this island.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That was extremely beneficial.
So you have another daughter, Molly Rose, who is now older than Rosalie was when she died. And so what was it like as Molly Rose was about to turn 2?
Harrowing. Yeah, not just 2, but a day or 2 older than Rosalie was. I think Rosalie was 1 year and 48 weeks old or something when she died. And whatever that date was pretty burned in our minds and on the calendar. And when Molly Rose was coming upon that age, my wife and I both, but I'll speak mostly for myself, we were just filled with superstition and wondering, if she'd be even allowed to move past that age. Again, looking for clues or something. Just I don't know. It was very, very harrowing, and we weren't really sure. I wrote very casually on my blog that I even felt like some sort of sacrifice was in order. Strangely, we had a cat who was dying at that same time. I was sure she would die on the exact date on the calendar. She wound up dying within a week. But, there was part of me that wanted to throw her into a volcano. The cat, I mean.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So there's that. But also, I feel like there's this tunnel that started on that date, which was somewhere in July. And I feel like we're just starting to see the end of it right now, where we can breathe comfortably and believe that she's going to be okay going forward. And it's been very strange to have a 2-year-old daughter for so long, right? We had Rosalie, who disappeared in 2011, and that was our only experience with a child for so long. And then Molly Rose came and we brought her up, but still we've never experienced an older child. So it felt like we had a 2-year-old for 5 or 6 years. So now Molly Rose is just starting to move past it, and it's extremely comforting. And the harrowing parts we're starting to soften a little bit. But it's strange. It's strange how your mind works, or at least how our minds are working in these strange circumstances.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I'm sure many people would do the exact same thing.
Really?
But Tom, thank you so much for talking. I loved your book. To be honest, I equally wanted to put it down and couldn't put it down. I cried my way through it, but finished it feeling hopeful and stronger, which is quite the experience for you to give to a reader. So I wish you and your family nothing but the best with it.
Oh, God. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Tom Hart is the creator of the new best-selling graphic memoir, Rosalie Lightning, and you can pick up a copy at your local bookstore, online, or anywhere else books are sold. If today's episode was helpful to you, show your support by picking up a copy of Tom's book, subscribing to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, or liking on Facebook. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Dr. Ellen Hendriksen. Next week on the podcast, we'll tackle rumination with 5 tips to let go and move on. In the meantime, show notes for this and every other episode are always available on quickanddirtytips.com/savvy-psychologist, and the Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and doesn't substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week for a happier, healthier mind.